I'd never told my parents that I was bullied. And my mom called me and she was very emotional. And she said, Eric, we just feel like terrible parents. How could we have not known? For most of my life, I battled that broken operating system of not being good enough. There's not much in our lives that we have control over, right? There's very few things, but between stimulus and response, we own that space.
Well, we're here with Dr. Eric Recker. And Eric, welcome to Time for Forgiveness. We're very enthused to jump into your story and your conversation.
Thanks for having me, Bob and Kelly. It's great to be here today.
Yeah. So, Eric, why don't we go back, like so many of us growing up, we have stories, we have things we go through, traumas and challenges. And I know you mentioned being bullied on the playground, and I can envision that happening. Unfortunately, I think I was the bully sometimes, but I want to hear your story. And why don't we just tee it up and go from there?
Yeah, so some of my earliest memories growing up in Pella, Iowa in the early 80s, I just remember not wanting to get up for school. I remember laying awake in bed staring at that alarm clock, just hoping that it wasn't going to go off or my mom wasn't going to come in and wake me up because I didn't want to go to school. And I don't know about where all of you grew up, but in Southeast Iowa in the early 80s, recess kickball was life. I mean, it was a big deal.
No, right there with you.
Yeah. So being able to play kickball at recess was huge. Right now I'm 6'5", I'm pretty athletic, but back then I was a little soft around the edges. I wore the husky jeans and all of those things. I was one of the youngest kids in my class. But when it came time to pick teams for recess kickball, I was told that I wasn't good enough to play. Would have been one thing if I was picked last, but those words, "you are not good enough to play," really stuck with me. And so I made a pact with myself that I would be so good at everything I ever did that no one would ever not pick me. And I said that to myself in either second or third grade on the side of that recess kickball field. It's only come back to me within the last several years. I think it was blocked for a number of years, but what that declaration made in me is someone who was never satisfied and someone who did truly believe that they weren't good enough. So all the way through high school, through college, through dental school, I wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough that I was in the top 15 in my dental school class. I had to be in the top 10. Then I got out of school and started running. All the way through marathon wasn't good enough. All the way through Ironman triathlon wasn't good enough. And for most of my life, I battled that broken operating system of not being good enough. And it's only been within the last several years that I've been able to confront that and find healing from those words that were spoken over me.
Interesting. And Eric, what was the moment in time when you confronted this? What transpired? Was there an event?
So there's actually been a few moments. One of them, I would not be able to sleep on Sunday nights. I think Sundays are a day that plague a lot of us who run businesses and are in charge of people. And a lot of people just hate the thought of going to work on Monday. I was worried that I wasn't sure actually what I was worried about. I just knew that I wasn't resting well. I'd get to work, I'd be behind the 8 ball. And it was one day that I was in my dental practice at about 5 o'clock in the morning. It's kind of set up in an oval. And I was walking that oval, just praying, God, just give me the strength to get through today because I'm just not feeling it. And what I heard was not audibly, but in my spirit, I heard, you don't have to be everything to everyone. And that realization hit me so hard. In that morning, I broke down in my office and I realized that's what I had been trying to be. I'd been trying to be everything to everyone, to my patients, to my team. Anyone who had a problem, they just brought it, dropped it at my feet. I had to figure it out. And I was terrified that at some point people were going to realize I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I was going to be exposed as an imposter. So I started going down that route, also realizing that I I had just been brutal on myself. I just felt this is how it was supposed to be for business owners, for people who are leading people. You were just supposed to be stressed and run down all the time. And it was in that moment that I started saying, okay, this is not sustainable. I'd been through significant seasons of burnout with chest pain, heart palpitations, panic attacks, all that stuff, all over those broken operating systems that I was dealing with.
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about this, because Bob and I were just talking about this last night. And I had heard once, how different the world would be from proving ourselves to expressing ourselves. I just think about how, and I'm sure so many people are going to resonate with what you're saying, that they are constantly trying to prove themselves, because something that was spoken over them so many years ago that, I don't know, I look back now, and most of those things that were spoken, even though I chose to like own them, or even at an unconscious level, didn't even know that they were directing my path, but they were spoken because that's maybe how someone felt about themselves. But there is such a difference from proving to expressing. And I guess that's where I'm leading. Is that what you feel like you're doing now, is expressing yourself?
100%. That I think that's amazing. That's the conversation you both were having last night, because it's exactly right. I had to prove myself to a bunch of people who moved on from me a long time ago.
Right. Yeah. They had nothing it's like they weren't thinking about you, right? And what you were dealing with. They had moved on with their life.
Yeah, exactly. And they moved on from it quite quickly. So, and that's what's crazy. It's like, how were those words able to wield that level of power over me? And I know so much more now than I did when I was obviously 8 or 9 years old. Spiritual warfare and attack and all of those different things that we can really be hit with. But yeah, Kelly, spot on. I felt like I had to prove myself. So I had to run marathons. I had to do Ironman triathlons. I had to climb mountains, and I had to have the best dental practice. And I had to do all of those things so the world could see that I was good enough.
Right.
Crazy.
Well, I'm glad you started there, Eric, because I think that's a theme. It's a common theme for a lot of people. It runs through the thread, and we're trying to compensate or make up for something that we think we're missing. And in reality, as you said, our spiritual DNA is perfect. We're not missing anything. We don't have to be anything that we're not. We're perfect just the way we're made. And so I love that you started there. So thank you.
But I think you also can relate in a very personal way from feeling the need to prove yourself for so many years versus really moving in the spaces, expressing yourself as well.
Right. Well, mine, Eric, was more in the like the educational realm, because when I was younger, I heard, you need a special class, you're slow, blah, blah, blah. And so that's kind of how he started out, even though it wasn't really true. But you know how it is when you're younger, you don't have the ability to reject ideas. We take them
real.
As real. Yeah. And so anyway, so I was always compensating for that. And then I had, as I moved into adulthood, like you, I kind of developed a list of people that I wanted to prove wrong. And so, and these people had no idea, who knows where they were. They didn't care. Right. But it was a game I was playing in my mind. And I think this recently, maybe last night, I finally got over it.
I mean, and I don't think we're kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, that just tells you the power of our words. We just use them so quickly and easily, and we don't really consider how they're going to land, obviously, with someone else. But I want to go back to something you said in the beginning, and it's such a powerful word. Like, you literally had to make, and maybe it was at an unconscious level, you didn't even know what you were doing at the time, but you said, I made a declaration.
Right.
Like, I made a decision with myself, and that's what it takes, making that decision. So that really stuck with me, that even at that age, because you could have made a lot of choices at that time, but you made a declaration that I'm not going to feel this way again.
Yeah. And I am so thankful. I look at people who have been bullied and people who home is not a safe place and school is not a safe place, or home is not safe and work is not safe, I was so thankful that I had a home where I was loved.
Right.
That was such a huge part of my journey. If that would have been tough, home would have been tough and school would have been tough, it would have been next to impossible. And a lot of people face that. But the thing about it, I'd never told my parents that I was bullied.
Wow.
I just didn't, because I don't know why. I don't know if I felt shame about it or what it was. And so about 2 years ago, I was doing a podcast, and my parents listened to the podcast, and my mom called me, and she was very emotional. And she said, "Eric, we just feel like terrible parents. How could we have not known?" And I said, "Mom, you cannot hold this against yourself. You provided what you could provide, and that was a loving home. I knew when I came home I was safe and loved. I knew that. And so it's up to you. You have to choose whether you're going to beat yourself up over this.
Yeah.
But that's your choice, and you don't need to do that because you had no idea what was going on."
Well, and I can imagine now that you hear these things in your practice with patients. Is that accurate? Do patients kind of open up about these type of topics with you while they're laying in your chair?
Yes. I didn't know when I was in dental school that I was also going to need a counseling degree.
Right.
So I need to be an HR professional to manage my team. I need to be a psychologist because I need to know what people are thinking. And then I need to have a counselor therapist degree for all the things that people share with me. It is amazing the things that I hear in my dental chair. And I'm so thankful for that, because it's the culmination of relationships that I've developed, that we've been able to develop over 20 plus years with some patients. I want to know if somebody comes in, I've known them for 20 years and they're off in the chair, they're not themselves. I want to ask the question, how are you really doing? Or call that out. Hey, you don't quite seem like yourself. Is everything okay? Anything we need to talk about?
Mm-hmm.
And I am, because of those words that were spoken over me, I am passionate about being a part of the good part of somebody's story. I always want to be that way in the things that I do, in the words that I say. Appropriately, I want to be part of the good part of somebody's story.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've said this before on the show, but you look back and what's happened in your life, and some of it you obviously did not ask for it and wouldn't ask for it again, but life makes us grow. And I look back at some of those events that have happened, and while they were hard, they have caused me or formed me into this person that I am today. And, it just sits with me that I can tell you my dentist is not asking me how my day and like what's off. So like that was conditioned in you, obviously, because of this experience. And, it has served you very well.
Yeah, I had a choice that even way back on the playground, I had a choice that I could say, okay, this is as good as life's going to get. I'm not good enough, and I'm going to let that be my plateau. But I didn't want that. I always felt like God had made me for something more. And I think that's part of the reason I pushed so hard, because I wanted to discover that more. But once I really started to learn some of these lessons, I thought, okay, God, what do you want me to do with this? How can I use this to impact the world? Because if we talk about my greater why, my greater why is to make a difference for God and his kingdom that's utterly disproportionate to who I am. That's what I want to do. That's my why. I try as much as I can to weigh my decisions against that why. But also once time moved on and I learned these lessons, I thought, okay, I have a choice. I can either continue to do dentistry and keep going down that route, which I plan on continuing to do. But I'm actually at a point where I've sold half of my practice. I have a partner that practices with me. We have 3 dentists total in our office. And so I'm able to see patients 3 days a week. And then I do life coaching and speaking and writing and stuff like that on the other days of the week. So it's this really cool space where I can have an impact on my team and on my patients. And then I can also have impact on other people who God puts in front of me. So I don't want these lessons in my journey to just stay within me. I want to be able to use it to help other people on their journeys.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that. And you don't want to go back to what you said. I think the two most prevalent limiting beliefs in most people or everyone is, one, I'm not good enough, and two, I'm not going to be loved. So I'm glad you brought that up. So it's not that, I think what one person is thinking and feeling, it happens to most people, but you figured out a way to overcome that limiting belief, because that's really all it is. It's a belief.
Mm-hmm.
It's not based in fact, right?
Right.
Your spiritual DNA is perfect. You don't have to change anything. We just have to change the way we're thinking. And so you were able to make that shift, Eric, and look what you're doing now. I love that you've channeled some of your time and your efforts into really impacting people, even beyond your practice. So that's really cool.
I want to go back to your practice because I think before we started recording, you had kind of mentioned that you have gotten an opportunity, let's say, to practice this thing we're calling forgiveness when you have some of those bullies sitting in your chair. And so I would love for you to kind of, how did you respond to that?
Tell us a story, Eric. Give us an example, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Obviously, we have HIPAA and all that kind of stuff, and I certainly wouldn't call somebody else out. But it was so interesting. I saw a name on the schedule as a new patient, and this was one of the people who I wouldn't say he was kind of the ringleader, but he was involved for sure.
Oh, really? This is somebody back from your childhood?
Back from my childhood.
That was coming in. Okay.
Yep.
Of course. Yeah,
back from my childhood.
Here he comes. He's resurfaced, right?
Yep. So I see his name on the schedule, and if I had hair on the back of my head, it probably would have stood up a little bit. I did actually have a little bit. This has been several years ago. But he came in, and I had this choice, new patient. I could have let one of the other docs in the practice see him, but I just knew instantly that I needed to do this as part of my journey. I needed to see this patient. And so I prayed about it. I definitely spent some time praying about it. I said, and what God really impressed on me is that this person is not the person that they were at that age. And I'm pretty confident that this person did not have a good home life growing up. I'm guessing he had a dissimilar level of love when he walked in the door than when I did. I don't know that for sure, but we know that hurt people. And I can only imagine what was going on. So what was really interesting is this patient not been to a dentist in over 15 years.
Wow.
And so their mouth reflected that, and they needed quite a bit of treatment. And he was honestly quite terrified of the prospect of all that we were going to have to do. And so I got to sit there and reassure him that we were going to be able to, I said, hey, we're going to take this one step at a time. You took the most important step, and you just came in today. You faced your fear. You got here. That's amazing. So let's not worry about how all of this has to be fixed. Let's worry about the next thing that has to be fixed. So let's just get through that. Mm-hmm. You got through today's appointment. Let's just get through the next one. And then we'll get through the next one. And we'll get you back to a place where you're healthy and everything will be good. And I just remember thinking how he made me feel when I was growing up. And I said, there's a little voice in me that's like, payback time.
And you just want to start ripping teeth out that,
Yeah. It's like, oh boy, we just use saline instead of anesthetic, something like that. No, I would never do that. But it was just so interesting. And I'm so thankful that I dealt with all that stuff from my past, because did
he know who you,
Right. Was he even
Was he even
aware
aware that it was you,
the
or
impact he had on you?
no? I
Yeah.
first want to know, did he know who he was seeing? He did
So,
sign up for that.
yeah. So I said to him, I said, so you used to give me a pretty bad time on the playground, the recess. He's like, I don't remember that. And all I can say is I was an idiot growing up.
Hmm.
So it was just so, I mean, there was so much. It took me a while to process this afterwards. Like, I had a big smile when I left the room, just because I get the chance to be a part of the good part of his story. And he obviously, I was still trying to prove myself to him. He didn't even remember it. So obviously it wasn't as big of a deal for him as it was for me, but it was just amazing how the roles had switched. So I was scared in front of him. Now he was scared in front of me, and how life came full circle with that. And I've actually had a couple other conversations with people who still live in my hometown who were part of the bullying. And one of them, I just said, hey man, we were just having a great conversation. And I said, hey, do you remember giving me a bad time when we were growing up? And similar thing, he's like, boy, I was just a jerk. I was a jerk to a lot of people. And I said, why do you think that was? And he said, because I didn't like myself at all.
Right. We're just a reflection of how we feel inside.
Yep. But it's interesting how I've been able to have some of those conversations. Now there's one guy that I haven't talked to at all. He was kind of the ringleader of the whole thing. That could potentially be a tough conversation.
Yeah.
But you know what? Also, if the time comes up, you know what? If I get the chance to be a part of the good part of his story, then we'll figure it out when it happens.
I love that.
Yeah. I love how you've changed the meaning. Now it's, if I get a chance to be the good part of his story.
Because when you change the meaning, like you go from the reaction to the response. And it's like a millisecond sometimes that we get to choose. Are we going to react? Or are we going to respond? And one of the things that has really helped me just in situations is to ask myself, I wonder why they're saying that. I wonder why they're doing that. And then it brings an awareness of probably what you're saying. It's really more about them. But it gives me feedback that, hey, I'm still curious about that and I get to go back to work on me. But I just want to acknowledge that, like, you went from reacting to that to now you're responding and you're a part of the good.
Yeah. And I love what you said there, Kelly, because there's not much in our lives that we have control over, right? There's very few things, but between stimulus and response, we own that space.
Mm.
And we can pause and ask ourselves a question. I think, and when I talk to groups, sometimes I talk about this. I said, who would like a superpower? And I talked to a group of middle schoolers about this. It was so fun. I said, who would want a superpower that would help keep you from getting in trouble with your parents? Oh, everybody raised their hand. Who would like a superpower that would help you to not say something that ticked off one of your friends? Oh, yeah. Who would like a superpower that would prevent you from posting something on social media that's going to get back to you in a bad way someday? Oh, yeah, everybody raises their hand. I said, okay, well, you're not going to be very excited about what the superpower is. And they're like, so they're all leaning in. It's like, what is it? I said, it's the pause. When something happens to you, instead of just snapping something back, take a deep breath, count to 5, do whatever you have to do so that you can create some space there so you can actually think and figure out what you want to do. I don't know how many of them use it, but I hope that sticks with them, because we do own that space.
You know, I love that, because we're kind of saying the same thing, but the focus is in the pause. And when you are intentional with the pause, like this idea, this practicing of forgiveness has become easier for me. We had Matthew West on, and he, wrote the song Forgiveness, which is incredible. But he said something on that podcast that I have yet to forget about, and I am really practicing, and I really may not always look like I am, but he said, run the race be the first one to say you're sorry. And I just thought about, okay, I'm going to be the one. I'm going to be the first one. And then be careful what you ask for, because I got a lot of things to practice with. And it's not always easy, but when you go to that pause, you do think and you consider different things and you have a different perspective. So I love that you said the word pause.
And Eric, I want to go back to this idea of the one thing we do control is the meaning. And the meaning is going to determine a lot, because the meaning is going to then determine how we're going to probably choose to respond. And so I think it all goes back to, you mentioned, give yourself some space to think. Everything originates in the mind, and we're forming ideas in the mind, and then we're moving that into the emotional side of the mind, and we're acting. And so I like how you're connecting this, because I think it's important to step back and look at some of the conditioned responses that are in us, and they're or you call it unconscious or in the subconscious, that we're not aware of. But it's basically running our habitual behavior. And again, it's unknown to a lot of people. It's just, well, that's just how I am, blah, blah, blah. But I like how you're helping people separate the response from the action. And it can really put us on a new path. But that's helpful.
I love the concept. I love how God made our brains. I love that he made our brains so that they can be rewired. So if we start to pause, if we start to measure our words, if we start to think out what we say, eventually that can become our default. Our brain will be rewired to do that. The whole fight or flight thing that we had evolutionarily when we grew up years and years ago, if we were getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger, we had to have that fight or flight. It's not necessarily a good response when we're talking with a loved one. And how many situations where families are broken, relationships have ended, all of that, how many times has that happened because somebody snapped back something hurtful at someone that wasn't measured? All the time. And so if we can get ahead of that and not say some of those things and measure our response, we'll have a lot fewer broken relationships that we have to deal with in our lives.
Okay, so when we're talking about rewiring, that doesn't happen overnight, right? We get through constant spaced repetition of those opportunities. So if we go back to when you said earlier that, I did well in dentist school, but I wasn't the very top. You did the Ironman. I don't know how you finished, but if you weren't first, so I guess the idea of where I'm going with this is at those times you just kept affirming, I'm not good enough. So when that maybe it doesn't, if it's still at any time still surfaces for you today, what is your response to that now?
Yeah, I think one thing that has helped me is just the concept of getting 1% better each day. So I talk to groups about this all the time. So I'm trying to love myself a little bit better each day. I'm trying to love my spouse a little bit better each day. I'm trying to give myself grace a little bit more each day. My coach called this out in me, and he said, Eric, you are an amazing guy, but I don't know if I've ever met someone who is harder on themselves and expects more out of themselves. So I could have seen that as, shoulders drop and I'm a terrible person. No, I'm trying to get 1% better at loving myself, giving myself grace. And when I'm able to do that, when I'm able to get a little bit better each time, then over time that ends up being significant. Mm-hmm. I'm also at the point where I'm 47. I'm not as fast as I used to be. So if I'm doing some kind of event, I'm going to get to a place where I'm happy with my training. And more importantly, I'm happy and having fun while I'm doing the event. That's more important to me now than, oh my gosh, I got to get across the line at this time, or it's a total failure. Mm-hmm. So, but it's been quite a journey. That's for sure. And the journey definitely continues.
I was going to say, I think you're just getting started. So I'm looking forward to seeing how things continue forward for you. Eric, before we wrap up, again, we're delving into the topic of forgiveness on this show. And what is the meaning of that word to you now? Everything you've been through, all the growth you've had and so forth. When you think of that word, how does that resonate in your life? And how do you, how do you interact with people when it comes to that topic today?
It's a challenging topic, and so I'm so glad that both of you are doing this podcast, because I think it's such a huge thing. And I find in my relationship with God that when things feel off between me and God, it's never him, it's always me. But I have not been spending enough time in confession with the expectancy of forgiveness. And so when that happens, then also my primary relationships aren't quite as good. And we had a situation over the last couple of years where there was some hurt that happened towards our family, and it was a really painful time. And the person who was involved in instigating the hurt, I have to see this person regularly. And it has been a journey to be around this person and not have some of the initial feelings that came up when I would see them. So my wife and I have talked a lot about it, talked with our kids a lot about it, and just that same thing. What does that look like? And part of it is not allowing that person to have undue headspace in our heads. It does not mean that we need to be friends. There used to be a friendship. That's probably not going to happen again, and that's okay. But I wish this person well on their journey. It's been a little bit challenging to get to that place, but I don't want to let that person have undue headspace and mess with what I'm trying to do in my life and what God is trying to do. But really, it's looking at a person who is just like we are, a broken person who I believe most of us are trying to do the best we can with what we have. All roads converge to where we are, trying to meet that person where they are, and understanding that whatever they did wasn't just directed at you. It's the culmination of everything that has happened in their lives. And when we see people that way and see them as broken people, just like we are broken people, it becomes easier to extend the grace which God extends to us.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think, what came to me right at the end as you shared all that is it's so easy to be offended today. Like it's just one of these commonalities, and I struggle with it too, where people are just easily offended. And we choose that, right? I mean, we can reject that idea or that emotion at any time. And I know you want to say something, honey.
No, I
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, even in our relationship, after 30 years, it's still easy to fall into that trap occasionally.
It's very easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah.
But I think what you just said is, when you look at it from a different perspective, it is easier to practice it, to give it to someone, but also to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the whole offended thing, oh boy.
Yeah.
We get on social media and we think that somebody that we've never met, we have nothing in common with them, all of a sudden they are going to post something that is aimed directly at us. Come on. You're not that important to start with, right?
Yeah.
But boy, we see all of these things and we have to get angry about them, and we have to take a stand on them, and we have to post something about it, and we have to No, boy, we're choosing that negative energy, and it just sucks the life out of us.
Well, and I think at the end of the day, we have to do the work internally so that we can give what we want to receive. And as you know, I mean, the old cliche, but it's true. You can't give something to somebody that you don't experience or have inside. And so this forgiveness thing, I think, starts with us. It starts with each individual. And I could tell, I don't know that you specifically talked about it, Eric, but at some point you gave yourself grace, you forgave yourself. And then you move that into, okay, now I'm going to go out and I'm going to affect people I'm interacting with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. Especially when you, for a lot of years, you look at yourself in the mirror and you hear those words, not good enough. But to forgive myself for saying that, and to now know that I'm getting to be a better father each day. I'm a broken human. I'm not a perfect father, but by God's grace, I'm a better father than I was a year ago. I'm a better husband than I was a year ago. I'm on a journey, and I'm going to keep trying to get a little better. Whatever happened in the past is in the past, and we're going to move forward.
Well, I'm looking around your office space there, and I see people that you're impacting right now. Is that your team above, back of your right shoulder? Is that your dental team?
Yep. So that was our dental team from several years ago. Yep.
Okay. But I see the things that are important to you.
Yes.
It's people.
Yes, exactly.
Love it. And the high Iowa Hawkeyes.
Yes, exactly. I have definitely said that I don't want a world where we don't have the opportunity to impact people and be around people. If dentistry was just for me, if it was just walking into a room, doing a procedure and walking out, I would have walked away from it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can tell that. You're a heart-led leader, Eric. That's what I love about you. I already know that. It comes across, even though we're not in person, though. I feel it.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate that.
Eric, so you have a book. Tell people where they can find you online if they want to check your stuff out and get to know you better.
Yeah. So ericrecker.com, really easy to find me. Links to everything's on there: Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. There's links to my books that I've written, coaching, speaking, all that kind of stuff. But as you can tell, I'm a relational person, so I'd love to have a conversation if I can help you on your journey.
Absolutely. Amen. All right. Well, again, we just had a really powerful conversation with Dr. Eric Recker. Check him out, get to know him better. Eric, any parting words for our listeners that you want to embark on here before we move on?
Yeah, one of the things I talk to people a ton about is when I faced burnout, the equation that was always there for me is that I was overcommitted, as in I had way too many things on my plate, and I wasn't taking care of myself. So if you can give yourself one tremendous gift over this next year, spend 15 minutes a day taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. Do something to take care of yourself, because it's hard to forgive if you're empty. You have to have something in the tank so that you can have grace to be gracious to other people. So spend a little time every day and do something that takes care of you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you ended with that, because it's something that's so easy just to put off. Like, well, I'll do that tomorrow, or, I got to do this for someone else, and you don't give to yourself. So
and the other thing that makes sense intellectually, but you have to be intentional about that.
Yes.
And so I appreciate you saying that, because it's all about intention.
It is. Our lives, if we set intentions for our lives will be so much more rich. Talked to a group just on Saturday, and I said, who would be interested in doing something with just a very minimal amount of time that could change your life in a year? And everybody raised their hand. I said, all right, who has 15 minutes a day? And I said, anybody who's not raising their hands, just bring your phone up and we'll take a look at your screen time and we'll talk about it. 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year is 65 hours a year. So if you took care of yourself for 65 hours this year using pockets of time that you already have, what could what could your life look like a year from now?
Right. Powerful. I love that.
Yeah, I like it. I was just going to say, I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yes.
I mean, you've caused me to think about a lot of things, and as I'm doing that right now. So I appreciate it. That's, I think one of the biggest reasons we do this show is just to cause people to think. So I appreciate you being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was interesting. We talked at the beginning, and where are we going to go with this? And I love where we've gone. It's been so much fun. It really has.
Good.
Yes, we really enjoyed it. Eric, thanks again for being on Time Forgiveness today.
Yeah, Bob and Kelly, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening and for watching Time for Forgiveness. Hey, listen, visit our website at timeforforgiveness.org. And here's the great news. You can now download our workbook. Just click on the QR code. It's that simple. You can also message us on our website because we read every single message, and we certainly love to help. You can also reach us on our socials on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email us, again, at info@timeforforgiveness.org. I'm Sean Parr for Bob and Kelly Pascuzzi. We'll see you next time on Time for Forgiveness.